It happened on a bright Tuesday afternoon, the kind that makes you believe life might just start over. I had just come back from my last class of the semester, my mind foggy from exhaustion, when I turned the handle of our shared apartment door and froze. Standing in the hallway, framed by the daylight flooding through the window, was her. My roommate's older sister. The same woman who once turned my world upside down before quietly vanishing from it. Her name was Isla Rivers, and the sight of her standing there again after 3 years felt like a secret the universe had decided to reopen. She didn't say anything at first. Her eyes, the same soft hazel that could disarm anyone, locked onto mine. Then she moved closer, just enough to block the door behind me. Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried more emotion than I'd ever heard before. "You always take your time," she said. Before I could breathe, she smiled faintly, a mix of pain and something almost like relief crossing her face. And just like that, the years between us vanished, replaced by all the unfinished words, all the questions left hanging in the air since the day she walked away, a backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us share more stories that heal hearts. I met Isla years ago through her younger brother, Ethan, my first college roommate. She was 3 years older, working as a medical intern in the city hospital while I was a freshman still figuring out who I was. She'd visit occasionally, always confident, always in control, with that faint scent of peppermint and something warm, like the memory of safety. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and made it feel brighter, but for me, she was the kind of light I couldn't look at for too long. Back then, I was just the awkward engineering student who tripped over words and rarely looked up from his books. But somehow, Isla noticed me. Maybe it was the way I tried too hard to help her brother with everything, or maybe it was the way I blushed every time she said my name. She'd tease me gently, laugh when I fumbled with words, and sometimes, when the evening got quiet, she'd sit beside me on the balcony and talk about how she felt lost despite everyone thinking she had it all together. Those were the nights I started to see who she really was. Beneath the calm, confident doctor in training was someone who feared she wasn't enough, someone carrying the weight of her family's expectations. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I wanted to carry some of that weight with her, but then, just when I started to believe we were building something real, she disappeared. One day she was there, smiling, teasing me about my cooking, and the next, her brother told me she'd been transferred to another city's hospital. No goodbye, no message, just gone. I tried to move on, tried to convince myself it was one-sided, but every time I walked past that empty balcony chair, something inside me stayed quiet. Years passed. I graduated, started my job, and rented a small apartment with Ethan again while I figured out life in the real world. And then came that Tuesday, the day Isla showed up unannounced, standing in front of my door with the same peppermint scent and a look that said everything I'd wanted to hear years ago. She stepped inside, breaking the silence first. "Ethan didn't tell you I was back, did he?" I shook my head, still trying to steady my heartbeat. "No. He's at work." She nodded, walking toward the living room, her steps soft but certain. The afternoon light followed her through the window, turning her hair into a shade of deep chestnut. She looked older, not aged, but lived. The kind of look that comes from nights spent in hospital corridors, from loss and learning how to begin again. "I came to see him," she said, then paused. "But I also came to see you." I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought about pretending everything was fine, pretending her leaving didn't hurt. But I couldn't. "Why now?" I asked quietly. She turned to face me, and her eyes glistened, not with tears but with something heavier, regret. "Because back then, I was scared," she said. "I thought leaving would make it easier for both of us. I thought I'd ruin your focus, your future. But when you care about someone, distance doesn't help. It just freezes you in time." The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the sound of the city carried through the window, honking cars, laughter, footsteps, but none of it reached me. It was just her voice echoing in my head. We talked for hours that day. About everything we never said, about the things that went wrong and the years that went missing. She told me how she'd gone through burnout at work, how she lost a patient that changed her forever, and how she realized that running from the people who cared only made the world colder. I told her how I'd spent years trying to forget her, only to find her shadow in every kind smile and every quiet night. At one point, she laughed softly and said, "You really did take your time, didn't you?" I smiled back, though it hurt. You said that like it was my fault. It wasn't, she whispered. It was mine. The light in the room dimmed as the sun began to set, but neither of us moved to turn on the lamps. We just sat there, two people trying to unlearn the silence between them. She looked around the apartment, her gaze lingering on the photo frames on the shelf, pictures of me, Ethan, our college memories, our small messy life. She smiled faintly. You two really built something nice here. I nodded. We tried. Then, after a long pause, she said something that would stay with me forever. You know, I used to think time heals everything. But sometimes, it doesn't heal, it just gives you a second chance to do it right. There was no dramatic confession, no cinematic music. Just the quiet truth of two people realizing that the pain they'd carried could turn into peace if they were brave enough to face it. When Ethan came home later that night, he was surprised to see her, but even more surprised to see the ease between us. He cracked a joke, we laughed, and for the first time in years, it felt like a home again. Isla stayed for dinner. She told stories about her patients, laughed at Ethan's bad cooking, and at one point, caught my gaze across the table and smiled like the years had finally forgiven us. Over the next few weeks, she visited often. Sometimes to see her brother, sometimes, maybe to see me. We'd go for walks after her shifts, stopping for coffee at the corner cafe. She'd tell me how she was learning to slow down, to breathe again. I'd tell her about my new projects, about how I was finally learning not to live through memories. And slowly, quietly, something started to heal between us. Then one afternoon, as I was getting ready to leave for work, she came by again. The same sunlight from that first day filled the hallway. I opened the door, and before I could speak, she stepped in front of me, blocking the doorway just like before. You always take your time, she whispered again, her voice gentle but sure. But I'm done waiting for the right moment. And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back, didn't think about what ifs or mistakes or the time we lost. I just let the moment exist, pure and unguarded. We didn't fall into some fairy tale ending. Life didn't suddenly get easier. There were still scars from the past, still uncertainties about the future. But we had something more powerful than perfection. We had honesty, forgiveness, and the quiet courage to try again. Months passed, and what began as hesitant reconnection turned into something steady and real. Isla eventually transferred back to the city permanently, working part-time so she could have a life outside the hospital. Ethan often teased us, calling us the slowest love story ever written. Maybe he was right, but maybe that was what made it beautiful. We learned that timing isn't about speed. It's about readiness, and sometimes, the people who leave aren't gone forever. They just return when both hearts are finally ready to meet halfway.